The earliest relationship, the most significant relationship that we have, the earliest, is with our mom and dad. It affects our careers. It affects our romantic relationships. That's why it's very, very vital to bring it into order. Release all negativity and unforgiveness. And I'm telling you, it will really help you flourish in your career.
Hi, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to have with me today Sylvia Yu Friedman. Sylvia is a much awarded and celebrated author, filmmaker, TV host. She's also worked with wealthy families across the globe in terms of leading their philanthropic activities. Sylvia, you've been an inspirational change maker. You've also recently come up with a book called Fearless. What was your first major persuasion-related breakthrough in your career?
I've often been told that I can sell ice to Eskimos. And I can't see that myself, but I learned the art of persuasion early on in my journalism career, especially in TV journalism. It is like pulling teeth to get people to show their face on camera and to be interviewed. So I think that is where I honed my chops, so to speak, to really persuade. And also I did something when I was in TV journalism called streeters. And that is, I had a camera person with me, and I would literally have to go out onto the streets, any street with a lot of people, and we would have the camera rolling, and I would have to ask random strangers the question of the day, like, what do you think of the local government's policy on this or that, or, to get their response. And that in itself was nearly impossible because most people just walked away. So yeah, I think that is where the genesis of where I learned how to persuade people to do something that they may not want to do.
Would you like to share with us what inspired you to invest your time and resources in writing another book?
This is Fearless, and the photo on the cover was something that was out of my comfort zone because I've been used to putting the spotlight on other people and in writing other stories, in being a change maker from behind the scenes. And I guess with this book, I was very vulnerable. And I wanted to share from really the good, the bad, the ugly, the hardest times in my life. I wanted to be real and share this with others so that others can grow, or that it could be a cheat code for people from topics like, how do you find your identity? If you have an identity crisis like I did growing up in an all-white neighborhood in Vancouver, Canada, and really struggled with shame of being Korean and all that, and the racism, and but later realizing these were my greatest blessings, that whenever we go through anything hard, anything heartbreaking, it causes us to grow like nothing else can if we process it well. And I've heard from men, even women, from all stages of their career, from very senior to those who are just starting out, that they resonated with topics like transitions. How do you navigate when you're in between jobs and you don't have a business card? And other topics like heartbreak, toxic offices, and the good bosses that I've had as well, writing about that, and the people who inspired me over the years, like the frontline workers who were rescuing those who were unspeakably suffering in sexual slavery or human trafficking situations. And I was able to see the best in people. And also I've interviewed traffickers, so I've seen the worst. I wanted to tell the world about what was going on to mobilize resources, funding, more awareness. And myself and my husband, Matt Friedman, we were at the forefront of the anti-trafficking movement in Asia. And now there's just so many groups that are either like philanthropists who are giving to anti-trafficking or frontline groups that are reaching these people. Because I remember in Hong Kong, it took me 9 months to look for the first trafficking victim here. And she was an African woman, a young woman with a 12-year-old daughter. And the traffickers threatened to harm her daughter back in Africa and her mother, who was taking care of her child. And I wanted to convey that to others, that yes, we are blessed. We have all our comforts, we have choices, but there are people in this world who've had their choices stolen from them. The call to action from my book, Fearless, is let us use, as professionals, let us use our time, our talents, our finances to help those who are marginalized and help those who've had their choices stolen from them. Because we can use our influence and our power to affect change.
I was also particularly touched by the section wherein you talked about in your book about your somewhat difficult relationship in the past with your father. And you do recommend that for grown-up kids or adults who have had strained relationships with one of their parents or both of them, you recommend that they should make up with them. And I thought that was very, very thoughtful.
So I've met too many people to count who are estranged with either one of their parents or both parents. And I noticed in them, and I noticed in myself before I reconciled with my father, that there was always this glass ceiling. And I felt like I couldn't break through and achieve the success that I wanted. I urge people, make a choice, a conscious decision, an act of your will, and then the emotions will eventually follow. And after people have done that, I have seen anecdotally that they started to flourish. Their faces looked lighter. They looked happier because the earliest relationship, the most significant relationship that we have, the earliest, is with our mom and dad. It affects our careers. It affects our romantic relationships. That's why it's very, very vital to bring it into order, release all negativity and unforgiveness. And I'm telling you, it will really help you flourish in your career, like nothing else.
And I think it's a very noble thought in terms of really reconciling with our parents if we ever had any strained relationships in the past. Because as you said, a healthy relationship with parents leads to a flourishing and thriving personal life as well as a thriving career. You have worked across some difficult parts, shall I say, of Southeast Asia. At the same time, you work with some of the wealthiest families in the world. So are there any similarities or differences in terms of how do you go about persuading these different types of people?
I guess what I have learned is that people are people, right? At the heart of who we are, no matter how many zeros we have in our bank accounts, we experience the same human conditions of loneliness, of greed or envy or wanting the best for our children. There are commonalities that are universal. And I try to appeal to that whenever I meet someone new. I love working with the grassroots, and there's something about being with them, and there's such a beautiful sincerity, such a beautiful focus on families. And yes, I can see this also with the wealthy families as well. Just a true sincerity to want to make a difference, that some recognize that they have been blessed, with wealth that, that perhaps that had they made different choices in life, it would not have turned out that way. I treat everyone the same. Like I will respect our cleaner, right? I will respect the taxi driver. I will respect, the person who's in the top 20 wealthiest in the world, right? To me, it's everyone deserves respect and dignity.
Great. No, thanks for sharing that. As you went about driving change, I'm sure there would be instances wherein you came across some really difficult people, right? Mm-hmm. How did you manage to, persuade them finally?
Sure. So yes, there will always be naysayers. There will always be obstacles when you are pioneering something totally new, because people will not understand you. So for instance, one example was I began researching the Japanese military forced prostitution system in 1999. Like I wrote my first article then. I was so green, didn't know what I was doing, and yet it was something I was passionate about. And from there, I had academics and other activists who would block me from getting the interviews that I needed. And initially, because I was naive and young, I was really shocked. My idealistic self was like, this isn't right. We should all be working together. But of course, nobody really works together in harmony unless, there's win-win-win, like on all sides, right? Yeah. And so I learned through that to just, get around these difficult people. I learned how to navigate. Another example is that there was someone actually on my team that was working against me. So it was politics on the team. And I didn't realize it fully. And yet I had a feeling, and yet things were going on behind the scenes that she was trying to get people to go with her decisions, because we were often at loggerheads. That was a bit of a shock, because I thought the whole ship would go down if you don't have harmony, right? And from this situation, I learned, be very discerning about who you partner with, and even who you align with from a distance. Like your core team has to be unified. It has to be strong. There has to be trust. And and this person kept wanting to take over everything, right? And so from there, I learned to be extra cautious, not to jump into any kind of partnership.
Great. Great perspective. What were some of your learnings based on your successes in relation to really driving change and getting people to change their behaviors?
We have to start with ourselves. We have to walk the talk and embody the message, right? Whatever we want to share with others, whatever change we want to see in others, we really have to believe in it and incarnate it, right? And it has to come out organically, just naturally from within. Otherwise, people will sense that it's forced. You've got to believe in it to the point of, I know this may sound extreme, but what are you willing to stand for? What are you willing to even lay down your life for? But if you have a cause that you're passionate about and you want to make a difference, you want to impact a group of people or a city or a nation, then you really have to believe and dedicate a good chunk of time, and there's sacrifices involved. So that's what I would say to people, to really examine yourself and know yourself. And then from there, when you know your identity, you will know what you stand for. and what you want to accomplish for the next generation.
You've achieved so many things. I mean, you just seem to be setting new goals and going after them and achieving them. But a large part of successful people like yourself is also about persuading yourself, persuading oneself to go after our goals. So how do you persuade yourself?
I nurture myself, mind, body, and soul. So physically, I get the rest that I need. Sleep is so crucial. And eating the right foods, right? Because it affects our everything, our day, our outlook, our makeup, our physiology. And spiritually, I pray and I maintain my faith. I will try to draw inspiration from readings, reading in LinkedIn posts, and to just stimulate my mind. Journaling helps because then I could write about, my goals, what I want to do, my frustrations. And so I guess ultimately persuading myself is it's not something I do consciously. When people say, "Oh, you've achieved a lot," and I don't feel like I have. Like, isn't that funny? Like, yeah, it's not something that I feel like because I want to do more. Like, I feel like there's so many marginalized people and so many poor people to help, and trafficking victims, that I feel like, gosh, like we can do more. I feel like being authentic and being as honest as you can, right? That helps. And so that's why doing the inner work is so important, because if one has hang-ups still, or issues are still working out, it will come through in your work. I feel really thankful that I've been able to bring in literally billions of US dollars worth of deals. And I would say that comes from the Art of Persuasion. And then also, you're right, like being able to believe in myself, right? And not having limited beliefs stop me. Because before, I used to not go for the big roles because I felt like, oh, I'm too afraid of failure. But working it all out so that I feel freedom, more than ever.
And how did that progression happen from working in relation to exposing and shining a light on human trafficking, and then now to private equity?
I've always been entrepreneurial. So I've always had a foot in business, right? I've been part of startups. So I had the skills. I started out as an analyst, and then I worked my way up to managing a fund. And so the basic skills were there, but the purpose, so I was doing it for nonprofit. And then I switched and flipped it to for-profit. When you're asking people to donate to a cause, it is really, really, really hard. And unless they were already planning to give anyways, right? So even in the writing, the letter, the ask, or if I'm sharing a pitch, it has to be so well crafted, right? I don't feel like business is a big leap because I feel like I've been doing business all my life, like just deal making all my life. But the deal making was more in the philanthropy space or in the campaigning space. And I've just taken all those skills and applied it to private equity. And I love it.
No, thanks for sharing that. And you talked about your pitch letter, for example. Do you have a kind of a playbook or kind of a template which you follow?
Not really. I guess because I've been doing this for so long, it just comes innately in some ways. And the number one thing that I abide by is be myself, be yourself, right? And to be as authentic as I can. And when I tell a story of a potential beneficiary or someone that, like a trafficking survivor, I try to, as much as I am able, as much as I'm humanly able, I try to respect that person, right? And I put myself in that person's shoes, whoever I'm writing to or speaking to, and also try to discern, what do they want, right? What would help them? What are they after? So you have to identify the other person. And so it's the otherness where I want to focus on them. And then, I can craft it. But if it's a general letter that is being sent out and it's a donation letter and it's many people, then, just being as authentic as can be, really writing with love. That is key for me, to really write with love and compassion. As cheesy as that sounds, I feel like even with this book, Fearless, it was the most personal book I've ever written. I don't think I would have been ready to write this even a few years ago. It took me a while to be able to examine and excavate myself and share this with other people. Because for so long, I've been used to focusing on others.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. As you went about achieving the various milestones in your career, were you inspired by any mentor or any role model at all?
Absolutely. My mother was very diplomatic, and she herself had the art of persuasion. So at her church, she can convince everybody from the leaders to, just about everyone to go to an event. And she had that inner strength, right? Because it has to come out from within. And my husband, Matthew Friedman, he's also a role model because he incarnates, he lives, breathes social change. He is very passionate about helping trafficking survivors and working with the private sector to end slavery. And for myself now, my new goals are helping vulnerable women and girls, to empower women and to work on gender inequality.
And just talking about books in general, any book or books have really inspired you?
I recently read my husband's next book, and that was good and inspiring. I think it's Memoirs of a Modern Slavery Activist. So he wrote honestly as well. So we were both on a similar journey. And so that, and then Alison Halitzer's Rethink the Couch, I edited her book, and it was her expat journey as a therapist in Hong Kong and Singapore. And her book is so witty, warm, super insightful. Stories will really stay with you for a long time. Another book that touched me deeply was Joan Didier's book, The Year of Magical Thinking, where she wrote about the losses of her husband and her daughter in such a, within a year of each other. And I enjoy personal memoirs where people are writing about some of the hardest experiences that they've gone through.
Thanks for sharing that. So anything else, Sylvia, you would like to share with our audience in terms of persuasion or in terms of aspiring change agents who are either starting their careers or are already, experienced professionals? What would be your advice to them?
Well, never give up, because there's a lot of obstacles, right? And funding is one of them, right? Because you're constantly fundraising, constantly trying to persuade people to support you. And it's not easy. So don't give up, because in time you're going to see some fruits, a lot of harvest. And my other piece of advice would be find that core group who can support you. Don't walk alone. Don't be a lone ranger. Be as real and authentic as you possibly can, as much as you're comfortable with. And it has to start from you. right? Any change has to begin from who you are, and then it all flows out of that. And so make sure that you yourself are free. Make sure that you've worked out all the issues, right? And I feel like I've come to that point, and now I don't care what other people think. I'll speak my mind and fearlessly, and if something's wrong and it's appropriate for me to share it, I will share it. And that takes years, I guess, of just being in different situations. But know thyself is so critical, because then you know your limits, because we're not superhuman, and then you can prevent burnout, or what you need to really impact other people. So we can't impact others from an empty cup. Our cup needs to be filled and overflowing. That is key, and that goes for our careers as well. We can't innovate or achieve like heights of success if we're empty inside.
What has really kind of jumped at me is consider your obstacles as your blessings, which you mentioned earlier in the podcast. Know thyself, and your cup should be full, and then only you're able to give to others. Be authentic. So, and lots of other very, very thoughtful and inspiring messages around persuasion, driving change, and making a big impact in this world. Thanks a lot, Sylvia. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Manish. I really enjoyed speaking with you.